Ashley here with HeartHookHome.com, and today we are going to learn how to crochet the Tunisian Puff Stitch. This is a very fun stitch that you can use with your Tunisian crochet hook. It creates these great diagonal lines here that are very visually appealing. We're going to learn how to create this in a way that offsets the puff stitches every row so that you're always having the same number of puffs every time while maintaining your straight sides. We're going to learn this together. Grab your Tunisian hook and let's get started. In order to crochet the Tunisian puff stitch, you need to start with an even number of chains. First, the very first thing we're going to do, as with most Tunisian crochet, we're going to set up our foundation row using Tunisian simple stitch. So we're going to find the second chain from our hook and we're going to pull up a loop. I'm going to pull up a loop in the back bar here. And I'm going to pull up a loop in every chain all the way to the end of the row. Now that I have all of my loops on my hook, I'm ready for my backward pass. So the very first thing I'm going to do is chain 1, and that is going to create the side of my stitch. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, all the way to the end of the row. Now that we have finished our foundation row, we are ready for our first row of puff stitches. What we're going to do is we're going to chain 1. We're going to skip this very first space. We're going to leave that guy alone right here. Skip that and we're going to work into the second space right here. So in order to make a puff stitch, we're going to yarn over and insert our hook in that second space and pull up a loop. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop in that same space. We're going to do this 3 times total. So that's my third yarn over and pull up a loop. Now I've got all these loops on my hook. What I'm going to do to complete my puff stitch is I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to pull through 5 loops only. So just these 5 right here. And what that does for here and for the duration of the pattern, your first puff stitch of every row, after you complete that first puff, you will always have those 3 loops there. If you do not have 3 loops, something's gone wonky, so you need to fix it. Okay, always have 3. Now, next, for your first puff stitch, we're going to skip this next space and we're going to make another puff in this one right here. So we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, same space, pull up a loop, yarn over, same space, pull up a loop. So now you've got all these loops on your hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through 5 only. So what that does, you can see that there's this one little guy kind of going off to the side here. That's those diagonal lines right here. Okay, so those are your yarn over. So you're going to pull through these first 5 only and not this guy over here. So yarn over, pull through these first 5, just like that. We're going to do this all the way to the end of the row. So we're going to skip the next one and we're going to do a puff in the next one. So you want 1 space in between for this very first puff stitch row. Once you've got all of your yarn overs, you're going to pull through those first 5 loops, skip 1, go into the next. 1, 2, 3. Yarn over, pull through those 5. And then we're going to do that one more time. We're going to skip this one right here and we're going to go into this one right here. Yarn over, pull through all of those. And we are almost done with our first puff. Let me pull my yarn. First row of puff stitches, we are almost finished. Now when we get over to the end, we are going to yarn over and we're going to pull up a loop in the outside stitch. See how there's this V right here? We're going to go under both sides of that V, just like this. And we're going to pull up a loop, just like that. And that is the end of our first puff stitch row. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 puffs. Now it's important to remember for the duration of your pattern, we are going to be offsetting these puffs so that we can maintain our straight sides, but you will always have the same number of puffs. So if you're in the middle of a project and you need to make sure that you're not losing or gaining any, you just want to make sure that you always have those 5 or the same number. Now in order to do our backward pass, we are going to chain 1, and that is going to be the side of the next stitch, or next row, and we're going to yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, all the way until we get back to the end. All right, so since we started in the second space for our foundation puff stitch row, we're going to start in the first space for this row. So you'll start in the second space and then the first space and then the second space and then the first space, and that will offset them every time. So what we're looking for here when we make our puff stitches, you see this diagonal bar, right? Like here we've got all these diagonal bars, right? We're going in between the diagonal bar and the puff of the last row. So we're finding that diagonal bar. We're going to go right where my fingernail is. So in between this space right here. So I'm going to yarn over. I'm not chaining 1 or anything on this row. Go in that space, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. And now we're going to yarn over and pull through 5. And remember, your first puff stitch of every row, you should always have 3 loops after creating that first puff stitch. If you've got 4 or 2 or a different number than 3, you're wrong, or it's wrong. So we need to go ahead and fix it before we continue on. Now, we've got our first puff stitch made here. We're going to yarn over, find the next space in between the diagonal bar and that puff stitch. So right here, we're going to make another puff. 1, 2, and 3. Yarn over, pull through 5. Let's puff stitch all the way to the end of the row. One, 2, 3. Yarn over, pull through 5. Find that next space. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now let's take a look at what we've got. Before we finish the rest, we've still got to do our end piece over here, right? But I want to make sure that number 1, we have 5 puffs like we did in the first row. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's good, right? Since we started way over here, that means that we're going to end this row a little differently than the last. What we're looking for here, when we start this last piece, we are looking for this loop right here and this loop right here. What we're going to do is we're going to insert our hook into that loop and that loop and then pull up a loop, right? I know that's a mouthful. So we are going to yarn over. We're going to find that top little piece of that chain, right? Here. Okay. Then we're not going to do anything with the working yarn. We're going to go straight into the side of the stitch below it. Okay, so we pull up, or insert our hook into there and there, and now we're going to pull up that loop. Okay, so basically those two are together with that one loop now, and now we have finished our first forward pass of that row. Right? I know that's kind of tricky. We're going to do it again. So let's go ahead and finish this one, and then we'll keep going. We're going to chain 1 and then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and this is our backward pass always. So yarn over, pull through 2 all the way till you get back. Okay. Looking good, looking good. So now, since we started the last row in the very first space, that means that we need to start the next row in the second space. And in order to get over to where we can start this, we need to start this row with a chain 1. When you do in the first space, you do not chain 1. When you're going into the second space, you do chain 1. Okay, so we're going to yarn over. We're going to make a puff stitch right in this space here. So this is the second space. There's our diagonal bar from our yarn over last row, and this is our puff. So I'm going to puff right in here. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to yarn over, pull through 5, and since that's the first puff of my row, I should have 3 loops on my hook, right? always 3. Yarn over, puff in the next. Since we started in the second, that means we need to end all the way over here. So let's look over here. You see that when we did that last row, we did that yarn over before we went into that side right there. We're going to place our last puff stitch right in that space right there. Right here. 1, 2, and 3. Yarn over, pull through 5. And now that we've got all of our puff stitches made for that row, we need to pull up a loop on the outside of that stitch. So on the rows that end with the puff at the very edge, we're just going to yarn over and we're going to go through the side of that last row, just like this, just like normal, right? Like normal Tunisian. So we're going to chain 1, yarn over, pull through 2, all the way to the end of the row. All right, and now we're ready to do that funky row, which is next, right? The one that starts over here, and we have to go through the side of these 2 loops on the side over here. So let's go ahead and get started. Since we are going into the very first space of this one, right? We went into the second space here, so we're going to go in the first space here. There's no chaining or anything. We're just going to yarn over and make our first puff right in that first space. And since we've got our loops on our hook, we're going to pull through 5, and that will leave 3 at the end of our first puff stitch. Let's puff all the way to the end of the row. Okay, now that we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 puffs, we're ready to do the edge bit, which is this row, for me at least when I was learning this stitch, this is the most confusing part for me. So when you start in the very far right, you have to do the fancy little bit at the ends, right? So what we're looking for is we're looking for this loop right on top of my thumbnail and this loop on the left of my thumbnail. So I'm going to yarn over, going to insert my hook right here, just that front part of that chain, right? Now I'm going to rotate it or kind of turn it down, and I'm going to pull up a loop and just in the front part of that side stitch, right? You want to do it again? I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to find that loop and that loop. So I'm going to go into the side or the front part of that one, rotate it down, and pull up in the side of that one. Now I'm going to pull up a loop. And now those 2 are together on that one, and I'm ready to chain 1 and do my yarn over all the way back. We'll do one more row together, but if you just continue repeating these 2 rows, it will end up just as we have in this gray swatch here, right? So by offsetting every row, we're keeping the sides straight and the same number of puffs in each row, right? So let's start one more together. Since I started in the very first puff, this one, I'm going to start in the second this time, and that means that I need to do a chain 1 to start, and now I'm going to puff in the second, so in this space right here. Pull through 5, which leaves, you guessed it, 3 loops on my hook. Perfect. Let's puff in this one. And now we are going to put a puff right on the edge here. So we're going to find this diagonal bar. We're going to open it up a little bit, and that's where we're going to place that last puff right here. And now that we've gotten our 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're ready to pull up that last loop, and we're not doing anything fancy on this one. On the puffs, on the rows that end up with the puffs on the very edge, we're just going to yarn over, look at the side of that stitch, and pull up a loop in the side of that stitch, just like that. And now we're ready to do our backward pass, so we're going to chain 1, we're going to yarn over, pull through 2, all the way back to the beginning. All right, and there we have it. This is a little bit holier because I'm using a cotton yarn than this gray one over here. It's the same hook I used for both. But don't you see how these beautiful diagonal lines here create that beautiful effect? I have a scarf pattern coming out soon with this, and it is absolutely gorgeous. They kind of look like little tulips to me, or little flowers. They're just so pretty. To fasten off on this, you're going to do the same thing that you would do with most Tunisian, or all Tunisian virtually, is you're going to insert your hook under the first bar, and you're going to slip stitch, go into the second, and slip stitch, go into the next, and slip stitch, all the way across the entire row. I always like to keep these slip stitches a little bit on the loose side because I feel like if I tighten them up too much, it makes the whole top end pull in more than the bottom end. So here we are with the beautiful Tunisian puff stitch. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I look forward to crocheting more with you soon. Thanks for watching.